Okay, so this week's episode, we have Drew Mitchell. He's the founder of Second Arc Advisors. He has extensive experience in the sales and strategic partnerships realm over the last 20 years, spanning huge roles at Uber, Pinterest, and Google. So join me in welcoming Drew Mitchell for our second episode of the Enablement Redefined podcast. Drew, with that intro, I'd love to hear, your intro, what you're doing now with Second Arc Advisors, and what your experience over the last 20 years has been. Share that with the group.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Nate. Excited to be here. So yeah, just a little bit more about myself. As Nate had said, I spent the last 20 years in big tech and sales and strategic partnership leadership roles at Google, Pinterest, and Uber. Um, at the start of this year, I decided to venture out on my own to build a early stage startup advisory business where I'm working with early stage companies on their go-to-market strategy, helping with people and organizational planning, in general, just thought partnership as companies start to scale. I did that because I was really excited about getting much closer to the start of a company's journey and helping that journey be a little less bumpy along the way by helping with some things that I learned over 20 years in big tech.
That's great. Appreciate the intro. So with that being said, kind of to your point on getting things started from the ground up with startups, I would love to start with starting sales organizations from scratch. Myself, being the head of go-to-market at Letter, we don't even have a sales org, so to speak, right? So I'd love to hear your experience with challenges and strategies that kind of get things started.
Yeah, well, I've been some pretty in similar position as you, Nate, at a bigger company, but it was at Uber over the last 2.5 years. I had the cool opportunity to build Uber's global advertising, sales, and account management organization from scratch, where it was just me to start, just like you, Nate, whereas you had to do everything. And so we scaled that up over 18 months, just shy of 2 years, from myself to about 250 people globally in 10 countries, across various different functions, which was a lot of fun, but extremely challenging to grow at that pace.
Yeah.
And to build, the infrastructure and frameworks you need to enable a sales team to go to market really quickly and have the information that they need at their fingertips, and type of training at the right time, and all the updated information as new products start rolling out every few weeks. That was an immense challenge to build that infrastructure alongside a very rapidly scaling sales team. So happy to dig into that journey as much as you want in this conversation.
I'd love to dig into that. I think we'll start the conversation maybe with startups, right?
Yeah.
As you think about, unless, I guess we'll kind of reframe it in the sense of most people coming into this new role are probably more familiar with a little bit more structure, and a little more rigor of, I have an existing team, here's their roles, here's the plan for the next 90 days. When you're by yourself starting something new, you don't really have 90 days to say, oh, this didn't work. Let's hire in 2 more people to do this and they'll go this other direction. How did you manage that, starting this from scratch of testing, iterating quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the first was, all right, what are the core roles I got to fill first, right? Because you can't, like I say, you can't do it all by yourself. So my first step was just to sit down and say, all right, for me to be successful in 90 days, these are the people I need to have in place within those 90 days. And that was, I mean, sounds pretty obvious, but literally just mapping out, all right, what does the organization need to look like? And what functions within the organization do I need first? So a couple things did there is okay, we obviously need to build our US business first. We need to make sure that we're covering each of our key verticals. This is in the case of Uber. So just mapping out, all right, what's the customer sets that we need to be going after? who in my network or that we can recruit are going to be able to best fill that position. But then what are the what's one or two support functions that
Hmm.
we need to actually put in place immediately so that those people can be enabled to be actually out there selling. And so one one decision I made early on was to hire a sales learning and development or enablement person from the start so that that person could help start building right alongside them and be in almost in market with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because while everyone at the start is going to be building their own pitch decks and
Right.
going out and selling to customers while also doing recruiting and all of the other things,
Hmm.
to have someone who can then take that back and actually then start building out, all right, these are the training that we need, this is the content we need to start developing from the start, was a decision I was really glad we made, because it helped us as we started going from 3 to 6, to
Yeah,
12, so on. And so that we weren't so behind in terms of sales training and enablement from the start.
that's interesting. Candidly, I don't hear that too often in my conversations with CROs and heads of sales. It almost seems like the learning, enablement, and development is an afterthought. Um, so, do you have any other experience? So, take Uber as the seemingly right decision. Do you have any other use cases where it didn't go the right way? And I'm assuming that your
Yeah.
response would be to hire ahead of the growth on the enablement front. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was from just like having seen it played out in
Right.
other organizations. Like,
Right.
what would I do differently if I was able to make that decision?
Hmm.
And it's not to say like in the other organizations I had there wasn't that type of support, but it always was like, okay, well now we've got a
Right.
hundred salespeople. We should maybe think about
Think
how we
about
support them.
that.
Uh,
Right.
and I didn't want that to be the case. And so, working with my direct boss, I, made the case like, I know right now we're very much in a game. Why those decisions end up happening is because you're in a game of like, okay, if I hire one person, how much revenue then comes in? It's much
Yeah.
easier to do that math when it's a salesperson, right?
Yeah,
You, you
exactly.
are you're signing up for whatever ARR they can bring in, and I had to say I will trade that ARR. I will just add it to the other first 5 people if you give
Hmm.
me one of these people, because I think it's actually going to enable them to have more success and have a higher ARR per salesperson
Yeah.
by bringing that person in early. So I was like taking a personal bet because I still had to deliver on the revenue,
Mm.
but it's just trading a piece of the puzzle that I felt was
Right.
important.
That's so interesting. I haven't heard it explained that way. That like, let's say your monthly, bookings is supposed to be 500K per, for the first 10 reps. But if you bring in an enablement person, don't hire the 11th rep or whatever it may be, their booking should be 600K now to get to the
Yeah,
total ARR number that you're talking about. But that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. You don't
yeah,
hear that
and
very often, I feel like.
yeah, because most, I'm sure other sales leader probably would argue with me that that maybe isn't the best decision. But the way that
Hmm.
I was looking at it is you're working. Yeah, particularly when you're a startup within a larger organization, you got strategic finance there telling you
Right.
this is what revenue needs to be delivered. And
Right.
so I was working against that number, and I felt confident enough that by bringing in, learning and development early,
Hmm.
it accelerates revenue more quickly, and thus I was willing to maintain the number I was given,
Yeah.
because otherwise I wasn't going to continue to get the headcount that I wanted. And
Makes
I
total
think the
sense.
important
Yeah.
part is like the acceleration, right? I think you and I may have talked about, is sales enablement even the right word for this function?
Hmm.
I like to think about it as sales acceleration because you're getting salespeople more productive faster. That
Hmm.
equals more ARR, and that equals being able to continue to hire more people because you're delivering on the number that strategic
Exactly.
finance or investors or whoever wants the
Right.
number.
Exactly. I'm a big proponent of since we talked about the sales acceleration, uh, not concept, but that discussion, I'd like to hit on that a little bit more. So obviously I'm a firm believer, working at Letter, that enablement is a huge part of acceleration. And as we started this conversation, moving the team up to 200 plus people, can you expand on the impact of having an enablement early in the context of acceleration? So maybe enablement and maybe other concepts related to acceleration. But as we think about sales performance and we think about the current challenges we're in of like efficient growth versus rep productivity and things like that, I constantly go back to acceleration because there's a lot of components that require a successful deal. So I'm curious, if you have anything to add to that of like what sales acceleration truly means and how we support that.
Yeah, for sure. We looked at it pretty simply, and built out the first financial models. I built out a model that said you're not going to have a fully productive salesperson until 6 months into the role.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first 3 months, we should expect that they're generating zero revenue.
Okay.
And no, I don't. The timing can be different for any business. We were doing that based upon what are deal cycles with very large advertisers, to convince them to adopt a brand new solution, blah, blah, blah. So that's how we built it. And so at the start, when we, only had one enablement person and we just had a little bit of training, that general like 6 months to be fully productive to hit the ARR numbers that we had expected for each sales rep was kind of playing out to be true. But what we saw was, as the enablement function was built up, where we had a clear, on 3-day onboarding, and then video recorded trainings for each of the products, live recordings for each product launch. We saw that like 6 months, like reducing down to much closer to 3 to 4 months. And that's a pretty significant swing when you're saying,
a material impact to ARR.
Yeah, exactly. We're having the time. That means we can go back to strategic finance and actually ask for more people because we hit the number and so on and so forth. So that's a simplistic view of it, but I think a pretty easy way to look at it is, let's have a hypothesis on how long we think it's going to take us to get to max productivity per salesperson based upon what we know about the industry that we're playing in. And let's track whether that number changes based upon the enablement tools that we're putting in place. Now, I'm making it all sound super smooth and linear and it was perfect. We had to learn a lot along the way. And I think it was still a huge struggle for Ryan, my sales enablement lead, to like keep pace with all of that stuff. And probably definitely could have been more, there were tools that he could have been using to help him that he didn't have at his fingertips.
Makes sense. So as you grew in this, experience up to 200, 250 people, kind of stepping out of the enablement front and running sales teams at a high velocity, what are some of the key learnings you took from that? Because going from 0 to 250 is massive anywhere, whether it's starting up something new at a large organization or starting at a new organization from scratch. That is a massive change. So if you were to provide some, growth tips to a CRO or a head of or a head of sales, what would you say?
Yeah, well, first is like creating a really solid foundation for who are the types of people that we are recruiting into our organization. And again, this is all like straightforward stuff, but I think people forget it sometimes. Is like you have to have very clear values for the types of sellers and leaders that you are hiring, such that the leaders that I hired initially, I had to have immense trust that they were going to be going out and evaluating the right talent and putting them into seat so that we could meet very lofty sales expectations very quickly. And if you don't have a very clear set of values and then an evaluation process for, are these the right folks? You're always going to miss on hiring sometimes, right? But you want your rate of success to be much higher than the rate of not success. And
Yeah.
I have always found that like being super clear about we are within our Uber teams is like, all right, we're looking for people who are super scrappy because this we're building on the fly.
Hmm.
We have to build people that have a lot of curiosity, right? Because you got to go out and learn the customer and curiosity about, all right, how does this actually work here? Because again, things being built on the fly. A lot of
Hmm.
humility because we want low ego people, and people that are willing just to have fun because we can't take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
Now, you put those in place, and then you have an evaluation criteria of like what are the types of questions I ask to find the right people. So not to belabor the point is you got to have a lens and a filter through which you are have strong evaluation so that you can hire rapidly because it's easy to miss on people when you're hiring really fast.
Hmm. Makes sense.
You don't want to be in a situation in 12 to 18 months where you're like replacing half of the organization.
Yeah.
Luckily, we got it pretty right in the first 2 years, and I had almost no turnover, and so again, I would just spend time on stuff that feels maybe a little fluffy. It's does not fit necessarily within a spreadsheet,
All right.
but it's super super important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's interesting, getting away from I don't say getting away from it, but I feel like the industry as a whole over the last 2 to 4 years has been very focused on data and numbers, rep productivity,
Yeah,
ops per rep. And that's probably at the onset of, some very data heavy roles being created, like in the
mhm,
focus on go to market and the focus on rev ops. I
yeah,
think that's also been lacking probably even before that. So I think the question naturally comes, the current state of the technology that supports sales teams. And we've been flooded with probably point solutions
yeah.
ever since kind of Salesforce came to be. Everyone wanted to provide a solution along the path. So do you have any comments on that? I think what I'm interested in is where do we go
Yeah,
from here, right? Because
yeah,
I agree the current state is getting back to basics, so to speak. So
yeah.
what does that mean in the new world of sales to a certain
Uh,
degree?
yeah, I I think the issue why we are where we are today is because all of these solutions have been created for people like me. And what I mean by that is people that just want to be able to, evaluate numbers on like for a large scale sales team. And that
Hmm.
stuff is important. But if you sit down with the individual salesperson, which we all were at some point,
Right.
and I was, these tools feel like taxes on their time. The value equation for them is almost zero, like many times, because
Yeah.
the solution was built from a perspective of how can we provide reporting to senior management and
Yeah.
RevOps such that they can push things down to the sales team, but all that information only gets there if the sales team wants to use the tool, and none of them do.
Right.
And so if we actually used a little bit more of a B2C mindset in how we developed these solutions, you would start from what does the salesperson actually need to
Hmm.
enable them to do their job more quickly and better. And if you
Yeah.
were actually to sit down and interview the salespeople, they would say, "These tools do not help me do my job more effectively or better." Right? They
Right.
just feel like it's big brother or big sister watching over them at all times.
Hmm.
We've got to invert that value equation for them. And these like sales enablement tools, whether it be CRM or sales training or virtual coaches, AI led coaches or AI sales rooms or whatever it is, if it's
Yeah.
solving for the salesperson's problem, they're going to use it more often.
Right.
The senior leadership and RevOps is going to get better information, and that
Yeah.
flywheel is going to work a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's my like I implore like
Yeah.
product development to think about who is actually the one who needs to use it every single day, and that is the individual salesperson.
Right. Yeah, it's the inside out approach rather than like outside in. It's like, here, go make 1,000 phone calls this week, and then I'll tell you what the phone call said using my new
Yeah,
tool.
yeah, yeah.
So let's dig on that a little bit more. I'm obviously super excited about the current state of AI and technology. Do you have a quick 2, 3, 4 sentence theory or point of view on how AI will transform sales and sales enablement, because I would probably
Yeah.
treat them slightly separately, even though they're related, in the organization. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think the big question is with AI for everything is like, oh, is it going to replace my job? Right. Like,
Right.
and that's a fair question. In sales, I probably asking the wrong guy, but I always think there's going to need to be human interaction, particularly when you think about enterprise level sales,
For
right?
sure.
Extremely relationship driven, extremely long sales cycles. Requires a lot of hand-holding, follow-up, et cetera, to get those deals to the finish line. That I think always requires a human to human connection. Now, AI has an immense place to play in that situation because thinking about using AI tools to more quickly develop presentations, to adapt them, to develop, contracts, to adapt the
Hmm.
contracts, like many of the steps along the way of the sales cycle have so many milestones that can be probably shortened
Hmm.
and taken off the plate of an individual salesperson or an account management person uh, that would just speed their time up and help them make smarter decisions too, right? That's the other part of it, of thinking about, hey, I'm hitting this objection, like help me think through 4 ways to beat this objection in real
Right.
time, right? Those types of things where
Hmm.
you have a thought partner in AI to help you get to solutioning more quickly. I'm super interested to see how that space goes. Like, there are a bunch of like tools that record your calls now and tell you what the main points were and stuff, and that's
Hmm.
good. That helps, right? Like instant note taking. Um, but I think there's a lot more that can be done around presentation development, contracting, objection handling,
Yeah.
role playing, a bunch of stuff. Um, Now, if you move down the cycle from enterprise, to mid market and longer tail, kind of outbound sales,
Hmm.
this is the like unknown question for me a little bit. Is I think AI will be for super high volume outbound sales. There could be a world where AI does take over some of that function in
Hmm.
terms of outreach, etc. I still think it requires people, but as AI advances so rapidly with voice technology and being able to actually have conversations with AI,
Yeah. It's
etc.,
freaky. Yeah.
it's crazy, I mean,
Yeah.
but it's like, you could see a world where that is like, okay, in a more transactional sales environment, where that could start taking um, some of those human roles
Right.
to do other things. So I don't know. Hopefully that wasn't too rambling of an answer. I think it's a
No,
lot
that
of
was
unknowns,
a
but
lot of unknowns. Yeah, I think that's the short story. And if you were to go back and let's take two things, right? Because you started as an AE at Google, right? So
mhm.
you knew from entry level positions of sales positions how AI could have impacted that role. Um, and then if you were to kind of leverage those experiences to the current state, how would you use AI today in its current form to be more efficient as a sales rep or to grow your team from scratch, hypothetically? How would you use it today?
Yeah. Uh, couple ways. Probably actually how I'm using it a lot today. Like I've been using, you know, ChatGPT and Gemini to help me
Hmm.
think through content development, presentation development, and the speed to which I'm actually developing presentations in
Hmm.
client situations today is so much faster. Like
Yeah.
even with our like very nascent tooling.
Right.
When I was an individual like contributor AE, I spent an immense amount of time just developing presentations. But probably that was like the biggest percentage of my job.
Oh, funny. Yeah.
Okay, I'm pitching client, whoever. I need, and it's this division, right? Oh, I gotta go out and now research. All right,
Tailor it.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Taylor. Like, okay, were their sales for the last quarter? What did the CEO say on the last earnings call? Like that
Mhm.
stuff. Now you can actually get fed to you pretty easily by a
Within
couple calls.
seconds. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in a format by which you could like plop it into a presentation pretty easily.
Right.
Um, so there's that. Certainly, I think the enterprise AEs do so much research on their customers.
Hmm.
Having all of that distilled succinctly, quickly in a usable format, either for speaking notes or for actual presentation, is really, really helpful. But
Sense.
then I would then start also thinking about how does AI help provide me value as an AE in terms of interacting with internal systems. So whatever CRM you're using, I think Google had its own homegrown one, and extracting information out of that was super valuable to me was very difficult.
Mm.
And I still think in today's environment with CRMs is still very difficult.
Right.
If I can like very easily be like, okay, I need to understand key trends with this customer over the last 12 months, with product A, XYZ,
Hmm.
and like having that at my fingertips via one little quick prompt would be
Yeah.
great. Other ways would be like, like easy, quick pitch practice. Every single sales organization sets up office hours for pitch practice. Two people
Mm.
show up, maybe.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
we
And
did it
then,
at Uber. Like it's
right.
like a couple people show up every
Right.
once in a while. Why is that the case? Because people are nervous to look stupid in front of their
Ex-
peers.
Exactly.
And if you can replicate that with someone who's not going to judge you or that you're thinking is judging you,
Right.
uh, the better. I really think that that's a space that could be really, really beneficial, is like the very quick off the cuff coaching in the exact moment when they are thinking about it or want
Hmm.
it, versus having to wait to a specific time where a peer is listening to you. And
Right.
sometimes that's a hindrance to people using it.
That makes total sense. And kind of to your point earlier on uh, tools, going back to the B2C type of model, and the current state of software for sales reps is very much tops down. Go do
Yeah.
this or use this tool. I
Yeah.
think what would be helpful is having a tool that you would like to live in
Hmm.
that's kind of your own, but also we can tie to metrics that say this tool works. You spend this
Yeah.
much time in it, you sell more deals, goes back to sales acceleration, and it really
Yeah.
is the kind of the combination of those things really that would be the most successful outcome probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're gonna have to, in this space, serve both of those needs, right? Like the leadership
Hmm.
needs to make sure that, and RevOps
Right.
needs to make sure that they're actually becoming more efficient and that
Hmm.
their reps are productive. That is absolutely a need.
Yeah.
But it's gotta come together with your point. Give me a tool I like to live in, right?
Right.
That actually is like fun to use, easy to use when I
Right.
need to use it. It doesn't feel as forced.
Yeah.
Salespeople are very like uh, they're very self motivated because they want to make more money, but
Right.
they're also very oftentimes individualistic and hate being told what to do.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so you got to strike that balance.
Hmm. Yeah. And that kind of, to that point, it kind of goes back to this idea of personalization, I think, both at like the content level, the training level, the coaching level. Every rep is different. Their skills are different. Their strength, their weaknesses and strengths are different. I think where it gets interesting with AI is, if you could have an AI that's tailored to each individual rep and organization and team, I think you start to have way different outcomes because,
Yeah.
like to your point, having an individualistic role requires probably more personalized experiences too.
Yeah, absolutely. To their style, their tone,
Yeah.
like it's got to feel like them, which
Hmm.
I think AI is already
Yeah.
getting pretty good at that.
Right. Yeah, it
And is
is.
getting better and better.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So we'll kind of shift a little bit to team management. We talked about it a little bit, hiring and things like that. Do you have any suggestions right now? Things on the outside seem pretty challenging, from go to
Yeah.
market to CROs to becoming a new AE. Do
Yeah.
you have any tips for, the current state? If like for any of those roles, really, it's a
Yeah.
challenging time, challenging market. If you were to kind of hand out your top three, top five for a given role, what would you say?
Uh, to prepare to get one of those roles, is that the
To be a successable, we'll start with
okay?
to be a successful AE. Like right now, I'll take an example. Like
Yeah.
I posted this on LinkedIn recently. This kind of
Yeah.
like comedic post of like outbound is dead, no, outbound is not dead. SDRs are strong. They're not strong. Like you just hear this conflation
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
just crap constantly of like
Yeah.
what's going on. All I know is I talk to 50 people a week and things are difficult. Like it's hard for me to get a hold of people on outbound, but when I do
Yeah.
talk to them, they're great conversations. So it's difficult. So let's start with the AE and like how
Yeah.
would I become an outperforming AE in today's world? What would I focus on? And how would
Yeah.
I kind of, be successful, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I know this is somewhat of an AI focused conversation, but I'm not going this route because it is. I honestly think every AE to CRO to CEO, everyone better be figuring out how they can make AI work for them to be better at their jobs.
Yeah.
I mentioned a couple, in your previous question when you asked me if I were an AE back then and I had this available to me, what would I do? Those are the things I would already start figuring out how to do
Hmm.
on my own, because you can, you know, do a lot of that stuff via ChatGPT and Gemini or whatever,
Right.
whichever your preference is. So learn how to make it work for you to get smarter, be more productive, and just like generate stuff faster, right?
Right.
Because the faster you are able to, like, let's say you create a more compelling presentation in half the time, you're doing
Yeah.
two more meetings with a customer that than you were in the past. And as I think Nate, you're a RevOps guy. Two more meetings with a customer usually results in more
Right.
revenue,
Right.
right? Like,
Exactly. Even if
so
your win
that I
rate,
know that's
yeah, if your win rate drops because you're quicker or whatever, but your quality is better, we'll
yeah.
take more meetings any day of the week.
Yeah. So not to sound glib, but it's just like figure out how to make that stuff work for you so that
Hmm.
because you're gonna in any environment now, you're going to be told here's the AI tool we're going to be using.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you can, if you're out actually interviewing for an AE job or whatever, and you can give examples of how this is how I would use this to be more productive, I think that gives you an interesting angle and leg up before everyone's doing it.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
If you're already inside, same thing, right? Like, advocate for tools. If your organization is not using it, advocate for those tools to make you a better salesperson, um, etc. And I think I would give that same advice all the way up the chain, right?
Hmm.
Like, and probably even more so up the chain because as you get more senior, you figure like you don't maybe don't need to learn all the new stuff. You
Right.
do. All right, because you got to understand, particularly, in any environment, particularly in sales, you got to understand what the individual salesperson is going through and needs and wants. And so all the way up, you've got to be living in their shoes, I think, to make a successful organization. So not to like jump more and more on the AI bandwagon, but I think that's going to be the core thing you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And then
I
there's
agree.
all this standard sales stuff, like
Well, that's kind of the basic that has to come
yeah,
later. It seems
yeah,
like.
yeah. Be curious, be
Right.
humble, be scrappy, all those things, kind of
Yeah.
value things that I mentioned before. and things will work out for you.
Yeah. Do you think there's any risk right now in the AI? Not even right now, I guess,
Oh,
in the future of over leveraging or over indexing on AI,
yeah,
and then obviously there's going to be a risk of picking the wrong tool or whatever. But what
yeah.
do you think about that as far as risks in the sales?
Yeah, I think there can be risks, sales, and just just general
Yeah.
life. Uh, does it make you lazier, or does it make you more willing to learn new things and exploring more things? Right?
Hmm.
It's I think with technology, anytime that's can be the struggle. Is it going to actually make me end up learning more stuff like that's really valuable, or is it going to make me a little lazier and like just consume a bunch of content I don't need to?
Right.
But in all seriousness, is it like, are you going to remain sharp or continue to sharpen your sales skills by utilizing it, or is it going to become a crutch
Hmm.
where you're just relying on it to tell you what to do?
Yeah.
Now,
That's a
I
good
think
point.
that there's a good balance of those two things, right? Utilizing the technology to think about things you may not have, to take a different angle with the sales pitch, to be more creative, right? Because you're stuck on something,
Hmm.
reduce time to market, all that sort of stuff. But I think the downsides are just sheer human laziness because it's like, well, that's really easy. I'll just
Yeah.
type it in there and it'll be done.
That's a good point because for those of the people that watch this that don't proofread the output of a prompt, for
Yeah,
example, you
yeah,
write me a sales pitch, like you could be literally just sending a pitch for the wrong product or the wrong customer if you don't pay attention. So you're right. There's a laziness factor here that we need to pay attention to, probably.
100%, and not like it won't sound like you, right? It
Yeah.
becomes obvious when
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like you. There was, a thing online, about Sam Altman's post about Ilya
Right.
leaving OpenAI, and people were like, "He doesn't capitalize on any of his other posts. This is all capitalized. It doesn't actually sound like him. I created a prompt where I got the exact same answer." So I'm not saying,
Wow.
by the way, I'm not saying that Sam Altman did. I'm just saying this is what
Right. Right.
was out there, and the perception was that like he didn't write it.
Hmm.
And maybe he didn't, but it didn't. People that follow his stuff didn't think it sounded like him.
That's funny.
Um, take that at a like very like much smaller scale. Individual salespeople start sounding like robots
Yeah.
to their audience. Like that's not a good outcome either.
Right. And to your point on the relationship side of sales, I think like we can clearly bifurcate, like you can be super efficient as a sales rep, but you still have to be a great, like an even better relationship manager to a certain degree, because
Yes.
people that are buyers are going to be overly like beat down on
Yes.
just incessant AI emails and calls and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you show up as a person and you're more efficient, I think that's kind of the sweet spot that we want to live in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I should have mentioned that, like, what are potential downfalls of
Mm,
a particularly a sales environment is just like inundation
yeah.
to the audience.
Yeah.
And I already see it,
Oh yeah.
even when I was at Uber, every service trying to sell me on, I want that you should use my service or you
Right.
should use my tool. I was getting so many messages and it all sounded like the same
The
after a while. And
same. Right.
I don't know if they were
Yeah.
AI generated or not,
Right.
but it was very similar. And it's like, you just tune it out.
You're numb to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. Okay. Cool. I don't have too much else to talk about today, so I'll leave the floor open to you if you have any kind of final thoughts. And if not, we can wrap it up and go from here.
No, I enjoyed the conversation. This whole space is super fascinating to watch. Uh, I think any sales organization has got to figure out a way to enable their people, their individual salespeople who are the people that really, really matter, to have tools that actually service them. I can't reiterate how important that is. because if it continues to be a product development cycle for the highest paid
Mhm.
person, it
Yeah.
continues to be the problem we are in, where no one wants to use the the tool that they've been handed.
Mhm.
So that's my soapbox for this conversation, and advocating for all those sales folks out there.
I love it. I'm sure they appreciate that as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nate, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate it.